Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. You ready for another episode of my Bigfoot sighting? Alright then, let's do this.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.
My first Bigfoot sighting was at a very young age, about 10 years old, and we'd been staying at some family of mine down in Brown County, Indiana, and it was, I'm going to say probably around the middle of summer, because everything was pretty greened up and all this. And nice warm weather, and being kids, it was me and my cousin, some friends of his there in a little area that they lived in. We'd been playing outside for biggest part of the time we was there. It was during that times, kids didn't have the Xboxes and stuff. Instead, we was always out playing. Pretty much got chased out of the house anyway, but we decided that we wanted to go back to the woods. It was right there behind my aunt's house. And being young boys, we were naturally had the adventure kind of thing going on. We wanted to go out and venture through the woods and explore and all this. None of us had ever expected to see anything like we did that day. It was something that a lot of people have looked at me like, how could such a young kid remember something like this? But anytime you have anything that really stands out, I guess I'm not really liking the word too much, but I can't think of another word for it, but traumatizes you. It'll stand to you. It'll hang on to you forever. And that day, I definitely had this stand out. We had been walking down this trail after we had decided to venture into the woods. We found a little trail, and it was a fairly narrow trail, in meaning that we had to walk in like a single file line. And the first boy went ahead of us, and I went in behind him, and my cousin and a couple of his friends, they kind of fall in behind us. We'd went through for quite a while, and again, never really suspected anything. Nothing was out of the ordinary. I don't even remember us really even talking or saying nothing. We were just walking and checking out the woods itself. A little boy, he came up that was in front of me. He came up to this, like a small valley there. And just about time he got to it, he had stopped. And when he stopped, I stepped on around him to go ahead and look on down into what was in front of him there. And just as I made my way around him and almost came to a stop myself, well, that's when I tell a lot of people Bigfoot jumped into my life. Now, at that time, I didn't know what a Bigfoot was. I had no clue. I don't even recall ever hearing anybody ever make mention of it. But from my left, this incredibly hairy, big, and the hair was extremely black. It jumped down in front of me, and it's like when you jump out of the back end of a pickup truck and you kind of bend at the knees and then stand back up. That's exactly what this did. I didn't look up, like looking up at its face or anything. I was just in shock. I didn't know what this was. I felt it when it hit the ground. I felt that thud. And then I felt the wind off of it as it stood up. It tore on off to my right. it never made any sounds, never had any kind of odors that I remember or anything. But I do know that that day I learned about Bigfoot, and I learned about it in a manner that I really don't know how to say it besides it jumped into my life. And ever since then, I've had Bigfoot in and out of my life over a great deal of years. I'm 53 now, and this has been the better part of 40 years that I've had this amazing being, and everything from sightings to encounters, just some amazing encounters. Getting back to the story of the first time, like I say, I remember just seeing that hair and it running off. We left out of there very quickly and went back home, told our parents, and they fair warned us to stay out of the woods, which at that time wasn't a problem because I think all of us are still shaking pretty good from what we just seen. But I let it go for a long time, never really spoke of it or said anything. Just kind of went on about my life. And it was after I got into the Army and ended up down at Fort Stewart, Georgia. We were out on some night maneuvers. And the guns, I was in an artillery unit, and our guns had went silent for the night. And I got the ever unpopular task of pulling gate guard, meaning that I would go up at the edge of the road where all the guns came in, and would have to sit out there in the dark with just a telephone that had a piece of wire run back to our command, and then with some weapons, but they were all loaded with blanks. And I had one buddy with me. We had sat out there in this foxhole, and it was extremely quiet. And I remember looking down that old gravel road, seeing them big old tall Georgia pines and them big dark silhouettes in that full moon. It was beautiful that night, real peaceful. Well, that's when Bigfoot decided to make his debut again. We got to hearing something walking very heavy. It was definitely on 2 feet. And the time in between the steps let me know that whatever this was fairly large. My buddy had no idea what it was. And at first I wasn't for sure, but then that day down there in Brown County came back. And it stood out to me. I think we're getting ready to see another one. Well, it made its way up the side of on the opposite side of the gravel road. And I'm not for sure what happened. If it's seen us, it got wind of us. Not for sure. But it stopped immediately on just right across the road from us, probably not more than 20, 25 feet. And it stayed back just in the edge of the wood line there. You could hear it kind of move around a little bit. We sat there for quite a while, not sure what to do. Directly it turned, away it went. Well, after we finally got our heart rates back down and got ourselves collected, we was trying to decide whether we should say anything or not. Now, if anybody that's ever spent time in service knows that when you come across anything really bizarre like that, it's better just not to say anything at all. Just let it go. And again, I done the same thing. I went back to not saying nothing for a great deal of years. Even after I got out of service, I never really told nobody. Then probably, 10 years, something like that ago. It's been a while. I ran across a buddy, made a new friend. He was a Marine. He's a veteran buddy. We went down to, of all places, back into Brown County, Indiana. And I'd been talking to him a little bit about the two encounters that I'd had, the sighting and the encounter. And he kind of shrugged it off. He didn't really buy into it. Well, that night things changed. The very first time we went back on this property to camp out, things changed. It's when we had tree knocks that were incredibly loud and close. On this property, we had everything happen to us there. We had discovered tracks. We had a tree limb thrown at us one night up behind our tent as we standing by the campfire. We had a couple of young ones come into camp one night after we'd already crawled in our tent. You could hear them outside playing around with the coolers and stuff, and you could hear it sounds so bizarre, but this is truly what happened. The young ones, when they're cutting up, if you will, they have a laughter, and it sounds just like human children laughing. It's the first time I'd ever heard that. Still not knowing what these are, not having any idea, and only having that one sighting at that time. Still wasn't for sure. I wanted to see one. Well, that wish got answered not too long after all that happened. I'd taken my wife down to the same spot. It was a very early spring. Grass hadn't greened up yet or nothing. She wanted to walk out and see where we camped and I'd been telling her about all these encounters and stuff that'd been going on. We went out and she decided she wanted to walk down the hill behind the campsite there just to kind of look around and see what it was like. We got down at the bottom and we heard 3 really deep, sharp whistles. It was almost like an alert. Well, at first she didn't know what it was, and I had a real good idea right away. And she proceeded to ask me, what is that? I said, it's not a bird. I said, just stand still and start watching, start looking around. Well, she starts looking around, and then that's when she got my attention and said, what is this? About 20, 30 yards from us, there was one laying on the side of the hill, and it was just laying there, kind of on its side, and it was taking its hand, laying the grass over, looking at us. This thing was amazing. It was just amazing to see this that close and out in the open. And it was even more amazing to the fact that I didn't even see it until she spotted and pointed it out. Never felt threatened, never felt like we was in harm's way. And it just kind of laid there and kept easing that grass over with that massive hand. It was extremely coal black. Now that's the first time I got to really see one like that. And for those that don't really know what a Bigfoot looks like, because there's a lot of people that has a curiosity but has never had the opportunity to get out in the woods for whatever reasons. Imagine, if you will, a football player, like a big lineman. Most of your linemen are very, very large individuals. Some of these Bigfoot will make linemen look like children. It's hard to really put into perspective just how tall and the stature of them, the muscular definition and everything is just absolutely amazing. They are very human-like. If you could imagine the fur not being there and just being the Bigfoot itself, it would look like a very powerful, strong bodybuilder type human. very thick, very muscular. The head sits pretty much right on in between the shoulders. There's hardly any neck at all to them. But the mass, the thickness of their head and everything, where it sits on their shoulder, is just, it's really hard to put into words. Their hands are just like a human's hands. Their feet, everything. With couple of small differences in their feet. On a human's foot, if you take your bare foot and place it in the dirt and then pull it straight back up, you can see an instep of where your foot is. And it's very obvious it's your footprint. Now, when you find a footprint of a Squatch, it'll have the same toe definition and everything to some degree, obviously a lot larger. But the foot won't have so much of an instep. It's more of it's almost like a rectangle shape, if you will. It's more squared off. It's broader. It's more like a pad, like a elephant's foot. On the bottom of an elephant's foot, it's more like a pad. That's what these look like. Except about midways, you'll be able to see the mid-tarsal break, where the foot actually kind of bends. Outside of that, these are so human-like. It's hard to imagine that they've been in hiding for so long and not really been seen more often, because how much they seem to be so curious. You would think that they'd be more out and you'd be able to see them more, but for whatever reasons, they're very reclusive. They don't like to be out too much, be seen. But we watched this amazing being for probably 15, 20 minutes. And we proceeded to ease away from it and go back up the way we came. It had gotten up and made its way up the hill from us. And it went probably 25, 30 feet up the hill straight from where it was at. And it got behind a tree and was holding the tree and was leaning over to the side looking out at us. A lot of people call that tree peeking because they're peeking around the tree. Naturally, my wife is totally blown away. Just could not believe that her first time out ever doing anything like that, and then she gets a Class A sighting like this. A lot of people have asked me, well, wasn't you afraid? Wasn't you worried? For some reason, I wasn't. I really wasn't. I was more amazed and more happy to see these. Now, I've had times where I go to a place right there in Brown County again. And Brown County, for me, it just seems to be drawn there. I just feel like that's where I got to be. But I go down there to a spot, and I've had them come right up to my truck where I'm camping. I had one incident where it was amazing. I had been out in the woods by myself that night and was on my parabolic and was listening. And I got to listening to them. They were out there moving around, but wasn't really overly active at night. So after several hours, I was getting tired, decided to go back to my truck and call it a night, crawl in a sleeping bag, and get up the next day and go out and do some daytime looking. I got back to my truck, throw the sleeping bag out in the back end, closed the lid down on the topper, laid down, and wasn't just a minute or so, I got this strange feeling I need to get up and look. I need to wake up. I need to look. I wasn't asleep. I just need to open my eyes and I need to look. I got that feeling. I don't know why. And when I did, I raised my head up slightly and looked straight out the back of the truck. And there he was. Massive. 4 foot or better at the shoulders. standing there, bent down and looking in the back end of my truck at me. Beautiful. Power. I mean, you could just see that the power, just the size, never felt threatened, never felt like anything was going to happen. I don't know why, but I proceeded to raise on up because I had to get a better look. And when I did, he stood upright. I couldn't tell you how tall he was because I couldn't see. I was trying to get out of that sleeping bag, and that thing had me hung up. But I could see him when he turned to the side and just walked away. Now, I've had people ask me about some of these encounters and these sightings. And ask me, don't I have any kind of feeling of being scared or worried or concerned or anything like that. I have a fear, but it's a respecting fear. I respect them and have just enough fear to know that what they could do if they were provoked. But when I do go to the woods, I know they're there. I've had the juveniles follow me. I can see them. I can hear them. I've had the adults come in close at night. Those red eyes, they'll stay off just a little ways from me, but they'll stay and they'll watch. I could see them out there. I've even had them come up behind me when I had a really small flashlight. I was trying to get in the back of my truck for the night. I was going to bed down. You'd hear them coming up behind me, rustling around just a few feet away. And when I turn around to look, they take off. It was like little kids playing with you. And finally, I laid my flashlight down, pointing inside my truck so it wouldn't be on them. I just turned around. I said, all right, you guys want to come up and play, that's fine, but give me a minute. I got to go to bed. Crazily enough, that's exactly what they did. They didn't bother me till I tried to lay down, and then I could hear them back up around the truck again. Now, people's asked me also about the fear, but they've also asked me, what kind of calls do you make? Now, I've gotten the privilege of being under the teaching of this one individual, and I won't mention his name, but he had told me that you need to talk to the forest people. And I had him explain to me what he meant. So he proceeded to tell me. So now when I go out, I talk to them, let them know I'm there, and tell them, thank you for letting me be in their woods. Let them know I'm not there to harm them or nothing. And just by doing that, the encounters have gotten so great. They'll come up to the truck. You know, there've been times even when I'm not even in bed, I'll be on the other side watching them play around out there in the woods. I can see their eyes moving around. Turn around, there'd be one of them up beside my truck. As soon as it realizes I'm looking at it, it'll take off. It's like they love to come in. They know that there's not going to be any harm done to them. Like I say, I've been dealing with these off and on for a little over, right about 40 years now. I've learned a great deal that you don't go out there expecting them to be the warm, fuzzy, cuddly kind of things you can just go out there and be friends with. You go out and you show respect, treat them with respect. Don't be out there making a bunch of racket and stuff, but just go out and enjoy. And they will come up to you. They will. It'll take time. They'll have to get to know you and warm up to you, especially when you keep going out to the same spot. But they will come to you. Now, after all these years, and I've been back out again just this year. Last year, I was out an incredible amount of time. Had several encounters. Had them come up to me, up there real close. I had one that was close enough. If it would have reached out, it probably would have touched my hand as I held my hand out to it. I couldn't see it because of all the dark, but I could definitely feel its presence there. You can hear it. I knew it was close. But I try not to push the boundaries with them too much, because I still, like I say, I don't know everything. But what I have learned is they love to be talked to. They love the respect. You leave them gifts. I try to leave them stuff like apples and stuff like that. And they like that. They've left me gifts. They brought me back like a pretty rock or something. And they'll leave it on my truck. They've left me one, I don't know where he got it, but it looked like a marble. It was like a glass. They brought it and left it for me. And just amazing things like this had happened over all these years. I finally decided that with all these encounters and sightings that I wanted to get a group started. We'd be able to get my story out, and there's so much more I could tell. So I started the group Bigfooting Indiana. We can be found on Facebook. I enjoy the people I've met, some of the stories I've heard, and I know that my stories are probably not as good as some others, but I do know that what I've had happen has been nothing short of amazing. And I'm just looking forward to getting back out there again and spending time with them. I'll be going back out this weekend. I'm looking forward to spending more time with the forest people. My name is Matt McGuire, and this is my story.
My first sighting of a Bigfoot was in 1989 on October 1st. It was opening day of bow season. Me and my buddy Jeff, we were going out hunting in our little spot we have out in Walhalla. And it was about 4:30 in the morning. He come pick me up in his truck and stuff, and we went out, and we got out to our spot where we were going to be hunting that morning. And we got out of the truck and got all our bows and everything ready, and got all our sprays and stuff that we were going to use and stuff, and some bait to take to our tree stands. Well, to get to our tree stands, we had to go over this railroad track that runs east and west. It's kind of built up on like a big berm. It goes up in the air. It's about 6 feet up in the air from the flat ground where the rest of the forest is. And so we got our stuff and we started going towards the deer stands, and we got up to the railroad tracks. We were just getting ready to cross, and I happened to look towards the east, and I'm looking. It was a full moon out, really quiet, no sound in the woods, a little chilly. And I look and I see something coming up on top of the railroad tracks there. I told my buddy Jeff, I go, "Hey, what is that?" He goes, "I don't know. Is that another hunter?" Because we didn't see nobody come in through this 2-track that we came through, so we didn't know if there was somebody else hunting in there. And it finally got up to the top, and I'm looking, and I'm going, "That ain't no guy, man." I go, "That's way too big to be a man." My buddy's going, he goes, "What is it?" He goes, "I don't know. Neither one of us had binoculars, so we could see it." And it started coming closer to us because I could see the outline of it really good. And the thing was huge, man. I'm talking 4x8 piece of plywood. This thing was at least 5 foot at the shoulders. Huge. 10 feet tall at least. Had to been at least 10. It was almost even with the railroad track sign. So we're sitting there, and it stopped. And I told my buddy Jeff, I go, "Wait a minute. Let me go down on the other side of the cul-de-sac here off the tracks and see what it does." So I walked down on the edge of the rocks there off the railroad tracks, and then the thing followed me down, and it stood there. I'm going, "What is going on? What's this dude's problem? I don't know what it is. I can't wrap around my head what it is." So I come back up to where my buddy was still standing up on top of the railroad tracks, and the thing followed me back up. So my buddy, he goes, I'm going to get my flashlight out. And he had pretty power. He had one of those Meg flashlights. And he flashed it down there. And we couldn't really see it that well because the light just soaked in the thing. It was just pure black. But you could see the whole outline of it really good with the moon being behind it. So I go, Jeff, what should we do? I should go back to the truck. He goes, I said, no, I'm going to the tree stand. That's what I told Jeff. So I started walking back down, and then the thing started coming closer to us again. And by this time, it's probably, I'm going to probably say 35 yards. Well, then we could see it pretty good. You could see the square chin, eyes sunk back in, flat head, didn't have a cone head, big shoulder, big hands, massive hands, tapered down towards the waist, legs were big calves. And then by that time, I didn't know what else to do. I was just still standing down there on the bottom, on the other side of the railroad tracks. My buddy standing there, and my buddy started crying, and I heard something weird sound, and my buddy's peeing himself, and I looked down at myself, and I even wetted myself, and I didn't even know what to do. I was like in shock. I couldn't move, so I finally snapped out of it, and I said, Jeff, we got to get to the tree stand. We can't make it back to the truck. And our tree stands were only like 40 yards away from the railroad tracks. So finally, my buddy, he snapped out of it. He goes, what are we going to do? Go back to the truck? I said, no, run to the tree stand. So we ran to the tree stands, got up there, and my tree stand was further back than my buddy Jeff's was. And there was no way in heck I could have made it to my tree stand because it was further back. So I went up his ladder stand with him. We're both on his ladder stand, just sitting there shaking. He dropped his bow. I still had my bow. I was shaking like a leaf. And then we were looking around to see if we could see anything. So I didn't know if the thing was going to chase us or what was going on. And then all of a sudden we heard a big crash coming down through the swamp that was in front of us, which was facing, my buddy's tree stand was facing north. And we were looking to the east again. And that's where the big swamp was. And the thing came down into the big swamp, just breaking limbs and just making tons of noise, screaming, god awful screams. And then it got quiet for a second, and then we heard another one, but it had a different pitch to it, like it was something completely different. And then all of a sudden the other one started up again, and then we heard like a big commotion going on, branches and trees snapping and stuff. And then all of a sudden we heard a big splash into the river, like something jumped into the river, and then it got all silent again. So by that time, it finally got daylight, and we're sitting there just shaking like we were freezing to death. And we sat up there for till at least 8 o'clock. And then finally we got down, we got enough nerve to get down, and we ran back to his truck, and then we took off. My second one was November 2020. It was on the 7th. I shot a 10-point buck, and I was sitting in a ground blind at the time. And my deer took off. He ran off. I hit it, made a good shot on him. And so I figured I'd give it a little bit of time because it was a good shot, but I wasn't quite sure. I was using a crossbow at the time. And it took off towards the north and went towards the west, towards Lake Michigan. So I hunt right next to the sand dunes there. And so I sat there for about 45 minutes. I called my son up to come help me track it and drag it out of there. So he finally shows up about an hour later, and we started tracking my deer. And then we get down, I don't know, about about I'd say 300 feet maybe in front of my tree stand. There's another 2-track that comes down through there. So we started walking that 2-track to the deer. I was tracking the blood, and he started going down the road, which was kind of strange to me. And then it cut back in and going up towards the sand dunes. And me and my son heard a big commotion again. And then I'm looking up on top of the dunes there, and I seen something big and black. I just seen the outline of it. And then I seen something rolling down the hill. And it made a big crash when it came to the bottom of this holler. And I couldn't see it no more because the holler went down from where I was standing. I couldn't see it no more because it dipped down. And then I seen the other thing still standing up on top of the hill. And it kind of turned to the south. I seen it turn, so it kind of rotated like a human would, but it was too big to be a human. And then I said, well, I started freaking out then because I started getting flashbacks from the first time I seen something. So I took my son. I said, well, we'll go back to the house and we'll sit for a couple hours and we'll come back and track it. So we waited, and my son, he had to go to work. So I went back out and I started tracking this thing again, my deer. And I got up on top of the dunes where it came, and I seen where the deer was laying because there was a good section of blood there. And then I found a leg. So I said, okay, what's going on here? And I didn't see no coyotes that day. And it wasn't a coyote attack anyways. You could tell it was just like ripped right off. So I walked another about 70 yards, and I found another leg. And I said, oh, I'm done. I turned around, I went back to my car, and that was it. So that was my second little encounter I had. The third one I had was me and my son were swimming in the Branch River. And my son was down there splashing around in the river and stuff, and I was sitting up by the fire because it was kind of a cooler day. So I had to get warmed up a little bit. And then I seen a shadow on the other side of the bank just kind of flashed like it was running through, and I wasn't sure what it was. And I yelled at my son. I said, hey, man, get out of there. I think I just seen a black bear. So he got up out of the river, and he goes, are you sure? I said, I don't know what it was. So we waited for about 20 minutes to see if we'd see it again, but we didn't see nothing. So we cooked up some hot dogs and stuff on the fire there, and then about an hour later, we went back into the river again. We were both in the river at this time. And then I looked over to the right again, and then I seen this thing moving up the ridge again. All I seen was the shadow of this thing, but you could see the outline of the legs. So I know it had two legs. And I mean, they were big legs. I couldn't see the rest of it because all the foliage that was on the trees. And being down in the river, the bank sat up quite high. And that was like my third sighting. I seen something that had two legs, and it was big. I was in my tree stand one time, and it was still dark out. I was waiting for daylight. I usually get out there about an hour before daylight anyways to let everything calm down and get quiet again from me making noise going in there. And I'm sitting there, and I got my harness on and everything. I got that all hooked up, and I sat down in the tree stand there, and about 20 minutes later, I feel this something slap the side of my tree stand, the platform. I mean, it gave it a pretty good poke where it shook my legs even. I have no idea what that could have been. I don't know if it was a bird, an owl hitting it or something. I didn't hear nothing flying off like wings or anything. But when it hit it, I could have swore I heard something walking off. I'm not sure on that because it was a little drizzly and it was raining out a little bit, so it was a little loud. But I could have swore I heard something walking away from my tree stand. That's about it.
Well, that's it for tonight's show. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and let us know. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves and the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.